Hey guys, welcome back to Let's Roll. And today I wanted to talk about the Orcs of 2024. So, you guys have probably watched videos discussing the absence of the orc stat block in the monster manual of 2024 D&D. And I wanted to talk about the stat block that supposedly replaces them in this book, called the Tough. I haven't seen anyone actually talk about what the Tough is and what the Tough does to the orcs, if that's going to be the stat block that replaces them. So I wanted to just get into that because I don't know if anyone's talked about how the Toughs influence how the orcs plays now. So I'm running this adventure, Dragon by Spire Peak, for a group of people. And if you don't know, there is a ton of encounters with orcs. Tons. Orcs are almost like, thing is, the adventure is about the dragon, but orcs are a predominant force in trying to get to fight the dragon, if that makes any sense. In my game, they have worked out a deal with the dragon to basically fight the orcs together, which I think is awesome. But yeah, let's talk about the stats, how the orcs run in this adventure. And this is the same orc stat block that is in the 2014 monster manual. So we begin with a AC of 13, 15 hit points, and they have a trait called Aggressive, where as a bonus action, they can move up to its speed toward a hostile creature that it can see. Basically a dash as a bonus action. And then Great Axe is their melee weapon, 1d12 plus 3 slashing. And then the Javelin, 1d6 plus 3 piercing. And the javelin can only be thrown 30 to 120 feet. It can be used melee or ranged, but I don't think anyone ever uses javelins as melee. Unless they were just wanting to give them a bit of variety visually, I guess. So, those are the orcs of 2014. Overall, not bad, right? So, they're low hit points, low armor class, high damage, because that Great Axe deals a crap ton of damage, or has a potential to. I will say, for lower levels, like level 1, 2, and 3, orcs are devastating. And I think that's pretty much how they were meant to be for this adventure, because it makes sense. It's a lower level adventure. It's 1 to 6. And orcs in their first few encounters are devastating. I almost TPK'd my party and the first encounter that they had with orcs. Alright, so let's talk about the Toughs. So the Toughs have given the orcs quite, in my opinion, an upgrade. I think they're a lot more dynamic, because they're not relying so much on the damage here. So for the normal Tough, they have an AC of 12, which is already one AC lower than the normal orc. But the HP has become 32, which is over double what the orc in 2020 or 2014 had. And for their trait, they have, instead of aggressive, they have pack tactics, which kind of makes sense because orcs work together. And if you don't know, pack tactics gives any two enemies within 5 feet of each other advantage on melee attack rolls. So if you have 2 orcs on you, they're going to be hitting you with advantage. And then, instead of the great axe, they now have a mace, which is 1d6 plus 2 bludgeoning damage. So half of what the great axe did, which I think is a good thing. And the heavy crossbow, which increases their range from 30 feet to 100 feet. And then you impose this advantage up to 400 feet, which I think is just awesome, because I love enemies that are able to hit that far away. I think there's a lot that can be said that that can be abused, but you know, that's up to the DM whether or not they want to abuse something like that. The damage on a heavy crossbow is more than a javelin. It is 1d10 plus 1 piercing, which is pretty decent, but I don't think it's enough to make a level 1, 2, or 3 character too worried, because it is ranged. I don't think they're going to be running into a defended camp anytime soon within that range of levels. And heavy crossbows also have to be reloaded too, as an action. So an orc shoots at you, deals 1d10 plus 1 piercing damage. The next turn, if they want to keep shooting at you, they have to reload. So they essentially have to skip their turn, which I think brings a dynamic into ranged combat that makes it a lot better for those lower levels to be able to have a chance. And there's another stat block in here called the Tough Boss, which is basically the war chief of 2024. I don't have, well, actually I do have the stat block for the war chief, so we can talk about that too. Let me see if I can find it real quick. So the Orc War Chief has an AC of 16, which is the same as the new Tough Boss. I'll just kind of like back and forth compare them. They have 93 hit points. The Tough Boss has 82. 11 less. Okay. The only difference here is instead of plus 44, so the War Chief has a 11d8 plus 44, which adds up to the average of 93 hit points. The Tough Boss has 11d8 plus 33, which makes the average 82, 11 less. Which I think has some, that has to do with their amount of constitution, I believe. But anyways. Their trait, once again, is Pack Tactics. So same thing there. The multi-attack... Oh, that's for the Tough Boss. The Tough Boss also has Pack Tactics. The War Chief has Aggressive still. And then they have another one, which is only available to them, I believe, called Grumptious Fury. Letting them deal an extra 1d8 damage when they hit with an attack. Which is pretty good. I like it, because you're going to be fighting these guys at a bit of higher levels, right? They're challenge rating 4. The Tough Boss surprisingly doesn't have anything like that, which, yeah, like I said, is surprising, but I think they make up for it in their attacks, so we'll get to that. The tough boss has a multi-attack, which is the same for the war chief. However, the war chief has the great axe again, which does the 1d12 plus 4 plus 1d8. They have the spear, which surprisingly gives them a lower range than the normal orc, 20 to 60. But it does 1d6 plus 4 plus 1d8 piercing. And then they have a battle cry, which is basically the war chief's way of giving pack tactics to everything else around it. So in a way, and that can only be used once a day, and it gives the war chief another attack as a bonus action. Cool. Yeah, and that's only till the start of the war chief's next turn. So it's not pack tactics throughout the entire combat, it's just pack tactics for one turn. Which for them I think is okay, but I think for the tough boss, the pack tactics throughout the whole combat is a lot better. And the tough boss also hits with a warhammer, which deals basically the same amount of damage as the great axe, just 2 points less. So the warhammer does 2d8 plus 3 bludgeoning damage. And if the target is a large or smaller creature, the target can be pushed up to 10 feet straight away from itself, which I think makes up for that 2 hit point difference. Why? I don't... It's not about the damage. It's about the variation in combat that it brings. I think it's just a lot more fun to have those abilities that push people around and do other things other than cause damage. And then I think pretty much everybody would agree with that sentiment. At least I hope, because everyone has always said combat in 5e can be one of those things where you just kind of sit there and start whacking at things. And this monster manual, this edition of D&D, I know technically it's the same edition, but still, this edition of D&D brings a lot more variation in what enemies can do to you positionally versus how much damage they do to you, which I think can be a lot more fun. And then the heavy crossbow still applies to the tough boss. So again, the ranged attack. Up to 100 feet or 400 feet if you want to impose disadvantage. And then that deals 2d10 plus 2 piercing damage. So do with that what you will. And both these stat blocks equal the challenge rating of the orc stat blocks. So definitely, whenever they made these, they definitely had orcs in mind. It's not just we're just going to tell them, hey, the tough is the new orc, yeah, whatever. No, if there were going to be orcs in 2024, these were them. These were the orcs. Like, literally, you could just replace the name tough with orc, and it would be the exact same. Yeah, I would say so. Even, to be fair, even the description of the toughs can be applied to orcs, especially now since they're playable characters. I know Wizards of the Coast has a thing where whatever a player can play doesn't apply into the monster manual, because they don't want to make the player characters monsters, right? And I will say, I think we're gonna get orc stat blocks in the Forgotten Realms book coming out later this year. I really do. If not, I'll eat my words. Okay, I will 100% eat my words. But the political part of all of this renaming and stuff, I think the monster manual is mainstream enough that they were like, you know what, alright, leave the orc out of the normal monster manual, because this is what the casuals are going to see, right? This is what normal, everyone that plays D&D is going to see this. Not everyone that plays D&D is going to go out and buy the Forgotten Realms guide. And I think they know that. Well, obviously they know that. Sales would be a big factor in that. I think the monster manual is obviously going to oversell any player guide to any campaign setting any day of the week. I think they're going to bring back the Orcs and the Forgotten Realms guide. And if not, like I said, I'll eat my words. I don't know if it's going to be the same orcs that we see in 2014. It's going to be interesting. I'll say that. Maybe they'll have these same stat blocks applied to certain orcs, and they'll actually have the different variations of orcs in that Forgotten Realms guide. I think that would be awesome. I think everyone would welcome that, because it would basically be a, I think it's Volos that has a different varieties of orcs in it as well. And to be able to see that again would be cool. Especially in the 2024 way that they build monsters. So that's what I wanted to say about orcs. I've recorded this video like 3 times trying to come up with a way that I wanted to put this entire situation, because there's a lot of obviously negativity about it, and I feel like every time that I've recorded this I brought even more negativity into it, and I didn't really like it, to be honest. I don't like being all negative about certain things, and D&D is still new to me in certain ways, and I just think it's too early for me to start getting negative. So I re-recorded this video to kind of get a more positive spin on everything. And it's not that, and I'll probably be called a shill at one point or another. Whether or not it's a joke, it doesn't matter. But to be completely honest, like, I just like D&D. I like the setting. I like the characters. I like the monsters. I think if managed correctly, D&D can be freaking awesome. And at the end of the day, I think that's what everybody that plays D&D wants. They just want a well-managed game. They just want a fun game. That's all we want, man. With consistent lore, that would be cool too, but I think the game part of it always comes first, and the lore will always come second whenever it comes to D&D. Maybe a hot take with some of you, but alright, the second thing I wanted to talk about. This is going to be shorter than the orc section because it's less of an issue, to be honest. But the Lizardfolk of D&D 2024. A lot of people have complained about the elemental nature of the Lizardfolk in 2024, and I can kind of get why they don't have the fact that they have Lizardfolk elementals in the book and not the humanoid Lizardfolk can be kind of wonky. To be fair, it says in the description that many Lizardfolk are humanoids, and these Lizardfolk for the elementals are basically powered up Lizardfolk. I think that's fair. I think it's completely fair to just use a Lizardfolk as the humanoid stat blocks and let it be that. At the end of the day, I think the humanoid stat blocks are perfect for DMs to go in and change them to however they want to fit the race or species that they make them. I think it's perfectly fine for a DM that wants a Lizardfolk assassin to go in, change a few things about that stat block, and be like, yep, this is what makes it a Lizardfolk. I think that makes sense. I really do. And If you disagree with me, please, I would love to know your explanation for why you disagree in the comments. But I think the humanoid stat blocks are absolutely perfect as blank slates for us to go in, apply species traits to those stat blocks, and call them whatever species that we just made that, or that we just applied to the traits to that stat block for. I would love to have a discussion over this, and maybe we can have a whole separate video about that, because you know, it's one of those things that might be more work on the DM, but I don't think DMs are afraid of work. At least we shouldn't be afraid of work. I definitely am not. I would rather have a blank slate for me to go in and change a stat block versus me having to stick with one stat block and be like, okay, yes, this is what a lizard folk is every time, no matter what. For example, we can have a lizard folk assassin, we can have a lizard folk performer, we can have a lizard folk noble, and all of those stat blocks are there for us to go in and just apply a few lizard folk traits, and then have the AC, the HP, and obviously we can change that too. But I think that HP, the AC, the initiative, I think that fits what any humanoid noble would be like. I think that's fair. And with that, I think that's going to be it for this video. I think this time I finally got what I wanted to portray in this video. And, well, I recorded this a day before you're going to see it. So I'm going to get work editing it. And, ladies and gentlemen, let's roll.